Ayca, Aydogdu, and welcome to Tell Me. Now, Corona crisis has proven to be one of the most difficult challenges for leaders all around the world. Overall, countries which have significantly done better show one thing in common: being led by a woman, suffering half as many deaths on average as those led by men. But what about in general? Are women better leaders than men? Does gender play a role in leadership? On Tell Me this week, you shared your voice on women leadership, and joining me on the programme to talk further on this, author and CEO of 21st gender consultancy firm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox and Professor of Business Psychology at Columbia University, Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the programme and welcome to Tell Me. So starting off with the same question to both of you, but Avivah, you first. Does gender play a role in leadership?
I think good leadership tends to be gender balanced, and I think there are 50% of the population today that are skilled and educated women. And if we're only getting our leadership from half the population, we're not getting the best. So it's not that women make better leaders, it's that half of potentially great leaders are likely to be women today.
Yeah, I'd say on average, women have an advantage. If you look at psychological qualities that make people more effective as leaders, things like empathy, integrity, emotional intelligence, and even hard skills, because women today are more qualified than men in most places around the world in most degrees, then women should make better leaders. Also, because there is discrimination and prejudice, the bar is higher for women, which means that those who get to the top, and there aren't that many, they tend to be better. So, the solution would not be to lower the bar to make it easier for competent women to get to the top, but raise the bar for men so that we have the same standards, quality control standards, and we have fewer incompetent people, men or women, get to the top.
Now, before we further dive into the conversation, and let's watch leader Ayca's report on the journey of women leaders, how they're doing back then and today.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has risen through the political ranks in her country to become a globally recognised politician. Praised for her handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and last year's Christchurch massacre, some admirers say it's proof that women make better leaders, but only 10% of countries worldwide are led by females. Taiwan's leader Tsai Ing-wen has also impressed. Taiwan was among the first countries to ban travel from China, and it adopted more than 120 control and contain measures within weeks, making a full lockdown unnecessary. Nearly a year after the outbreak began, Taiwan has recorded just 7 deaths. In Iceland, Prime Minister Katrin Jakobsdóttir moved quickly to implement a comprehensive track and trace system offering free testing across the Nordic country. When questioned on her nation's success at containing the virus, she said many female leaders have been listening very closely to scientists.
Be ready to admit that we are all really learning by doing, and probably we will make mistakes. And I think that has been maybe the biggest issue of leadership, and maybe that comes easier to women than men.
In 1960, Sri Lanka elected the world's first female prime minister. But 60 years later, only just over 90 women have been elected head of state or government. And of the 193 countries recognized by the United Nations, currently only 21 are led by females. Former US President Barack Obama broke barriers as his country's first black president and has long recognized the benefits women bring to government. Last year, he said if for 2 years every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board about everything, living standards and outcomes. Germany's Angela Merkel, now in the 15th year of her chancellorship, is considered by many to still be at the top of her game. As the most powerful woman in the world, she has managed to maintain her popularity throughout her long term in office, successfully navigating a series of national and international crises by seeking consensus. Merkel arguably remains the standout role model who broke through that glass ceiling that eludes so many women in politics and business worldwide. Juliet Ayca, TRT World.
Aviva, now interesting facts there by Julita Ayca. So I found former President Barack Obama's words very impressive though. For 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by a woman, you would see a significant improvement across the boards about everything, living standards and outcomes. What do you make of those words?
Well, I tend to agree with them. Change and innovation will come from new leadership in many places. And what we're seeing in the world today is with our small test pool of those 10% of countries run by women, they have outperformed, particularly in this time of crisis. They told the truth, they were very direct, they didn't meander around, they were incredibly decisive, they acted quickly to address the crisis. They used science, no fake news, no denials. They spoke and let the scientists run a lot of their policies. And they did all that with a very particular tone and leadership style, which was full of love for the people that they were very eminently serving, as opposed to these kind of more obvious power grabs of some leaders. And they've been so much contrasted, these kind of inspiring women that you've just shown, with the kind of opposite example of some really toxic male leadership, what Thomas will call not just incompetent, but dangerous male leadership, that has made the crisis so much worse in certain countries. So the contrast between those two is, yeah, of course, we all agree with Obama. Give me more of what seems to be working right now.
And let's bring in Thomas here into the conversation. So one of the facts we shared there was also that today only 21 countries out of 193 recognized by the United Nations is led by a woman. So what does that really tell us about progress, Thomas?
That is very slow. Progress is slow, and prejudice, discrimination, and perceptions trump reality and facts. You know, in a normal world, we wouldn't select leaders based on their gender. We would select them based on their talent. And if you did that, you would at minimum end up with a 50-50 split. And our research suggests that you would actually have women over-indexing. So I think Obama's quote is actually a conservative estimate of the impact and the progress that women would bring to the table. Now, it's also important to understand that the few and low number of countries that are female-led, it's easy to point at Merkel and see so many impressive qualities of leadership: rationality, objectivity, sanity, humility, and the ability to change and adapt, you know, to facts rather than divide people, and, you know, a focus on substance rather than style. And so there are today female leaders that display a lot of these positive qualities. Jacinta Ardern, another example, but they also highlight the maturity of followers. These women, you couldn't just export them to other countries. They have emerged in systems and societies where people want more vulnerable, competent, and talented leaders, and where they don't need to be entertained or have someone in charge who, you know, matches the traditional macho archetype of the strong man leader. And that talks to the evolution and maturity of those societies as well.
Well, speaking about Merkel there, we have Jamal Güneş from Munich, who sent a video and talked about Angela Merkel. Let's watch that and take it from there.
Seit 2005 ist sie Kanzlerin. Sie hat in ihrer Karriere und während ihrer 15-jährigen Amtszeit als Bundeskanzlerin immer wieder gegen die übermächtige Männerwelt in der Politik durchgesetzt. Sie ist für mich die stärkste Frau der Welt. In Deutschland wird sie auch Mutter der Nation genannt. Als Frau hat sie viele Eigenschaften, die sie auch gegenüber den Männern sehr oft unterscheidet bzw. überlegen macht. Sie ist geduldig, zuhörend und ausdauernd. Sie ist sehr intelligent. Dies hat sie immer wieder in den Verhandlungen in der EU, aber auch in Deutschland bewiesen. Sie hat viele Reformen in Deutschland eingeführt. Sie führte Deutschland durch viele Krisen erfolgreich wieder in ruhigere Gewässer. So auch aktuell in der Corona-Krise hat sie letztendlich wieder einmal ihre Führungsqualitäten bewiesen. Bemerkenswert sind ihre Aussagen 2015, als sie im Bundeskanzleramt die Aussage bzw. die Wörter vom früheren Bundespräsident Christian Wulff wiederholte. Islam gehört zu Deutschland.
Now, Avivah, continuing with you here. So, Angela Merkel was named the most powerful woman of the world, and a generation of Germans won't even remember probably a time when their head of state wasn't a woman. So, she's called the Mutti, the mother of the nation, 15 years in power. I mean, of course, this journey wasn't an easy ride for her, being from East Germany, being called the little girl of helmet calls. But looking at today, what was the key to her success, especially among a male-dominated political culture?
Well, interestingly, she comes from East Germany, as you said. I don't think Angela Merkel would have come from West Germany. One of the specificities that of the East Germany in which she was raised was that it was egalitarian between the sexes. There was a lot of daycare, there was a lot of support, women were encouraged to work, they had equality of education. This is not at all what we see in West Germany then, or sad to say, even to some extent today. The cultural differences between the two halves of divided Germany are part of the success that created this extraordinarily skilled, powerful, balanced leader, who, by the way, is also grooming another generation of female leaders. We might want to add that the current head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was her associate for a long time and is now in an even broader scope of power.
Well, let's now continue with another video. As we shared, many have shared videos with us on their opinions and views. And here's Savannah Lane from Washington, D.C.
Lately, the question of female leadership linked success has been recently discussed more than ever, with a surge of studies claiming that female-led countries have managed the coronavirus pandemic better than their male counterparts. While it is true that countries like that of New Zealand, Taiwan, and Germany have fared better than others led by men, this is really something that is difficult to wholly separate and claim success based solely upon gender differences. Additionally, because there are far fewer, unfortunately, female-led countries, the data points are much less available to have a complete and comparative analysis. However, there's no question that female leaders do operate and lead differently. A Harvard Business Review study shared that females scored slightly higher in overall leadership effectiveness in a workplace study, with other studies sharing that women are more interpersonally oriented when it comes to leadership styles. So the question to me is not really whether or not women are better leaders, but should be how can we encourage this different style of leadership and collaboration across genders, party differences, socioeconomic backgrounds, and more to improve the status of those who are not fully equitably represented. This can only happen once we increase gender parity throughout the world. So instead of focusing on a comparison, I hope that we can continue to empower, embolden, and uplift female voices to increase collaborative and representative leadership.
Now, Thomas, this is Savannah's message there from Washington, D.C. Overall, looking at women leaders, it is said, analysis show that they concentrate more on health, education, and the crisis such as climate change more than men do. So this is what we need today, which the emphasis lies on. But you have written a book on why do so many incompetent men become leaders and how to fix it. So why is that? Why is it so hard for competent women to advance as leaders?
I think, in general, people seem to prefer incompetent men to competent women. I mean, that's the short answer to your question. Ironically, a lot of the discussion around gender and leadership seems to have concluded over the past decades that we need to make women more like men. And that would be a big mistake, because there's no need for women or anybody really in a logical world to showcase overconfidence, aggression, lean in when they don't have the talents to back it up. And this idea that masculinity equates to leadership effectiveness has long been a toxic myth.
Now let's watch a video from Iceland from Sonja.
Hi everybody. This week's topic is a very challenging one and a dangerous one, I might add. I do believe that men and women as leaders are having the same end goal, which is success. We could be talking about family or business or even running a country. The end goal is always success. It is the path that men take versus women that might be different. Men are more spontaneous, women are more practical. Which is very good. It's very good to be practical in situations like now, COVID-19. But I believe also being a good leader, that also means that you have to have the trust of your community. And sometimes women have a broader spectrum of their community that trust them than men. And this has to do something with the family aspect. Yeah, so this just came to my mind, yeah, that's it for now. Bye.
Let me also share an interesting quote by Rassanes. He said, data suggests men have been disastrous leaders, while women who found themselves at the top table has often been the result of imitating toxic masculinity pervasive in politics. However, the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's decisive handling of the COVID crisis in her country may have ushered a new era of women leaders, dispelling sexist myths and disappointing fragile men. Well, talking there about Jacinda Ardern, which actually many viewers who shared with us their opinions seem to think that she's the strongest at the moment in women leadership and tend to talk more about her than the other women leaders. So let me also share not just the COVID crisis, but Hilal Özdemir from Istanbul mentions about how she embraces everyone and every religion.
When I think about women leaders, the leader of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, is the first name comes into my mind. I was on air during that terrifying moments of attacked to innocent Muslim people just praying in the mosques. And Ardern covered her hair and cried with the victims' relatives. They are us, she said of the victims. And following her lead, the people of New Zealand stood side by side with the victims of atrocity. She managed to bring New Zealand together at what could have been a hugely divisive moment for the country. And while watching her, I recognized she uses we much more often than she uses I. She talks about her country for all its citizens, not just for certain groups. And her authenticity, empathy, and kindness is highly visible. She's proving that caring about and supporting people shouldn't hold you back, rather empower you.
Avivah, so here talking about Jacinda Ardern, and you shared a point of view earlier on saying that it took us the corona crisis to talk about this and to realise that women are better leaders than men in many aspects, actually, and looking at how they're leading the crisis worldwide. So why is it taking us the corona crisis to open our eyes?
Well, I think what's interesting is why, in addition to what that lady just said about Jacinda, why is Jacinda the #1 name? Because she's probably the #1 media star. The media has a huge role to play in the role models that they also put on screens and display. I just wrote an article about how the BBC has just gender balanced for the first time in the last couple of years. The interviews and the experts that they have on all their shows worldwide. One of the challenges is up till now, the media has underrepresented women dramatically. So we don't see or hear about women leaders and what they're doing. And the experts that we rely on a whole range of key issues are always men. So that's why we all share, men and women, a perception that leadership is more naturally male. And it will take a huge re-education of us all. I am very familiar with also that comment that women have been socialized to talk more about we than I. All women around the world, wherever you go, whatever company you go into, share that characteristic that they will use the we pronoun more than the I pronoun. And for the moment, what we're seeing in companies is lots of coaching programs encouraging women to use that I pronoun more so they can sound more leader-like. That's the mistake we're still in.
Well, Avivah, I'm definitely taking your messages on board. And let's also now watch another video, because this is from Iceland, from Ollie. And Iceland is one of the global leaders, I believe, in gender equality. So let's see what he's got to say from there.
Hi everybody, my name is Ólafur Örn. I'm here to discuss the question if women are better leaders than men. I don't think that they necessarily are, and I don't think that they necessarily aren't. I think diversity in leadership is the most important. To mix in men and women equally would give the best outcome. Having said that, I think during a crisis like COVID-19, Iceland was lucky enough to have both diversity and female leadership, because in some ways women govern more humane than most men, without saying that every man are the same or every woman are the same. So again, I think the key to happiness is diversity in everything.
Now, Thomas, of course, Iceland is an interesting country to look at, and Ollie's message from there, because they are one of the leaders in gender equality, so I assume they're happier than most of us, and he says the key to happiness is diversity. Well, what you talked about earlier, though, looking at that there's still only 21 countries that are out of 193 led by women, there's still very little progress, and there's still the psychological barriers. So what do we need to do? How do we tackle this?
Well, the reality is that progress is slow, and in a way, we shouldn't see the issue as how long it will take to reach parity or when are we going to get there. The reality is that countries and societies that change and get there first will outperform the others, and the current pandemic is a brutal test or proof of that assumption, that hypothesis. But I think hopefully other countries will see the lesson. And again, it's not about the gender of the person who is in charge, but the talent they have. And fundamentally, whether you have somebody in charge who is an egomaniac, who puts them ahead of the teams and is interested only in their own individual agenda, or someone who cares about others. It's really as simple as that, Nobody wants to follow a leader who says, me first.
Well, as you said, Thomas, it took us the hard way to see it, and I want to share another video here, because Uma Kampamti from University of Reading actually looked at the data and analysed and researched the data of how women leaders did really do during the coronavirus. Let's see what she's got to say, and as that's what's common.
Hi. I'm Uma Kampamti, Professor of Economics and Head of School at the University of Reading. In May this year, together with a colleague of mine at the University of Liverpool, Supriya Garikipati, I started doing some work on whether female leaders had done a better job of leading in the pandemic. This was still the first quarter of the pandemic, and we hadn't had the second wave yet. We found that the raw data itself showed that deaths were on average 1,000 in female-led countries and 2,000 in male-led countries. Analyzing this more systematically by matching each female-led country with the male-led country based on a number of characteristics, including population density, the number of elderly people, as well as gender equality, health expenditure, and so on, we found that female-led countries did have significantly fewer deaths. We analyzed what the reason might be. At this point, of course, there was only one policy instrument that governments had, and this was lockdown. And we found that female-led countries locked down significantly earlier than male-led countries. In effect, female-led countries locked down 25 deaths before male-led countries, and that was significant. This meant that female-led countries had made an early choice about lockdown, and they communicated it to their citizens better at that point than male-led countries. We do not know, of course, what's been happening since then and in the latest set of latest waves of the epidemic. Thank you.
Well, those are the facts, as Uma kindly shared with us here on Tell Me. Avivah, so no more time left. So last words to you, a message for the future on women leadership, on gender balance and gender equality.
Well, let me end on a controversial note then. I don't think we need to keep saying to a lot of other women that women are better. I think we need to get men like Thomas to say to other men that women's leadership deserves its time in the sun, because we're going to need to elect them, vote them, and promote them we need men and women to be aligned on this idea that they're better leadership. And the media has a huge role to play. So thank you for featuring this. We need to get more men engaged in this topic and speaking out, as it's their role in part to develop more gender balance across the board in politics, companies, and I would add at home in their COVID-struck couples. Gender balance in politics and in companies often starts with gender balance and supportive roles at home.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. It was a pleasure talking to you, Avivah Wittenberg-Cox and Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic. Thank you very much. Well, that's it from us here on Tell Me today. So thank you for watching us and sharing your views with us. You can get in touch with me on my Insta, Chacha to tell me what matters to you. What would you like us to talk about? So let me know. Do stay safe and sane. Until next week.